So, I finally decided to make the first installment of my Omori mod review series. I know I said I'd try to make it a couple weeks ago, but my desire to do it kinda went away. However, I got a random burst of motivation to make this, which is always nice. I'll cut straight to the point, but since this is the first installment of the mod review series, I'll need to set a couple things straight. First of all, I will not be reviewing alternate universes, or AUs. If the series does well, I might decide to review some, but as it stands right now, I'm not. And why am I not doing that? Well, this leads into my second thing. What will the reviews focus on? Well, it's very simple. These mod reviews will focus on the content of the mod in question and review how closely it follows narratives and motifs and possible motifs these mods may establish that could theoretically correlate with the original game in some way. So, essentially, how faithful the mod is to the original game narrative-wise. If there is some sort of fighting or more gameplay-focused element of the mod, that will be skipped unless it contains important information relating to the narrative. All good? Good. With that being said, let us begin my first Omori mod review video. Alright, so, the first mod that I'll be talking about is a pretty interesting one. This is Pink Tinted Love, the shipping mod. Now, this might seem kind of pointless, and it might seem like there's not much to talk about, but I promise you this is actually an extremely interesting mod that goes past, haha, look, Sunny and Aubrey are dating. It actually adheres to the original game very faithfully in some aspects, very cleanly and concisely clears up what happened at the end of the original game, and actually establishes its own overarching narratives, while setting the stage for how the characters will go forward in the future. I'll get to all that when I get to that, though. Now, I want to say that I'm not going to be going scene by scene or briefly summarizing what they're doing in each scene. I think it's more important to focus on the more important scenes that have to do with the narrative. If you want to watch a full playthrough of the mod to see what happens, I'll put one in the description. I highly encourage you to do that before watching this video, though. I'll be skipping portions of the mod to get to important scenes, while briefly touching on things that I think are cool or interesting in some way. Some scenes might be important because of a character reason, so I'll include those as well. Alright, enough yapping, let's begin with the review. Interestingly enough, we actually start out in white space in this mod, and it turns out we are reminiscing about the events of the original game. I guess it can be argued that he was just reminiscing about Headspace and not actually going back to Headspace in the way that he did during the original game. But I will say that the descent into black space, the separation between Omori and Sunny, and the view of white space being totally empty during the final fight in the original game, all narratively imply that Headspace is essentially entirely no more. The purpose of Headspace, to escape from his trauma, no longer serves a purpose. I've debated a few people about this before, and I could go on, but it would probably add an additional 5 minutes to the length of the video. I could type a comment if you're interested in hearing what I have to say, but at the very least, the black light bulb shouldn't exist now that the truth has been exposed. Before going on with the events of the mod, I want to address the elephant in the room. Yes, Sunny talks a lot in this mod, and while it may seem weird and out of character, I will actually defend this. Obviously, you cannot expect someone to have the same personality for years on end. While Sunny's whole thing was him not changing for 4 years, I think it makes sense for him to talk more. As we'll find out later in the mod, he's gotten therapy, medication, he's doing better at home, and all of his friends have forgiven him after the truth, so he's less closed off now and more open to them. While his character in the original game might not be that talkative, it's only natural for people to grow up and change over the course of time. That's something Sunny struggled with in the original game, was the fear of growing up. I think that it's reasonable to have the goal of talking to more people and being more open, especially considering everything Sunny has been through. This is all set a year after the events of the original game, so there's certainly time for development to take place. It's not like Sunny was entirely closed off and entirely silent during the original game either. I mean, he literally took part-time jobs during the original game, so he's not entirely closed off, or not as closed off as some people think he is. The main overarching narrative in this mod, said by the developer himself, is moving on from grief, which I think is a fantastic continuation of a morgue story for each of the individual characters. It's simply natural progression. You'll see this narrative come up a lot in the mod, and I'll note what it does, but I think that the narrative, moving on from grief, also applies in the form of changing yourself as you grow up for the better. And for Sunny, one way to do that is to be more talkative. You get what I'm saying? Hopefully so. Anyway, time to actually move on to the events of the mod. To start off, you read a letter from Aubrey basically asking to hang out next time you visit. The scene about having a history of delusions is also a nice touch. Before talking with Aubrey, you can interact with the mailbox and you get this little scene. I think it's a very interesting touch and shows how their lives obviously aren't completely back to normal yet. I like it. One notable design choice for Aubrey is the decision to make part of her hair dye begin fading and turning back to black. My interpretation of this design choice is because she dyed her hair pink when she was beginning her delinquent phase of her life, and then the dye fading away as a sign of her returning to normalcy and being a good person once again. There might not be a solid reason as to why this design choice was chosen, and I might entirely be missing the mark, but that's just one way to think about it. The scene in Hobby is talking about the newest edition of Captain Spaceboys paralleling the events of the game, which is also a cool reference. Anyway, going to fix it, this mod sets up Kim Basil as a possible couple, which is an interesting choice, but that'll be relevant to what I'm talking about later. Or not, I guess we'll see. So, we get the first extremely important scene of the game, and these scenes are the types of scenes that I'm going to mainly be focusing my reviews on. Since this is the first time you're seeing Basil on this individual trip, Sunny has been visiting every month since he left for context, you do have some catching up to do. I think it's very well done. Life getting better at home for Sunny is a natural step in progression, as I said earlier, but I will have something to say about that later, which I'll talk about later. Now, here's the first line of dialogue that really opened my eye to how good this mod was. The line, "We've been given a second chance," right? I don't know why, but the single line of dialogue just sums up the entire mod for me. The narrative of the original game implies that Sunny and Basil should be forgiven. You can watch my video on why that should happen. And this is a logical continuation and thankfulness of that. Basil saying to Sunny to cherish his feelings is also more expression of their thankfulness of being forgiven, which I'd understand if I were in their shoes. They talk about Sunny's eye and Aubreys' arm, and you can clearly see the narratives of forgiveness that the original game possesses, and then the moving on from grief narrative that the mod sets up itself. The rest of the conversation isn't too important, just Sunny talking to Basil about Kim. I don't really have anything to say about that relationship in this mod, so I'll gloss over it unless it's important to what I'm talking to. Anyway, here's when I found Kel sleeping on the basketball court. This conversation also sets up Kel and Chris as another couple, which isn't really important to what I'm talking about. The line about missing seeing Kel and Aubrey banter is also a lovely touch. The scene on the bench is also nice, setting up Sunny's affinity for the peacefulness of faraway town compared to the city. While I think it's reasonable to assume Sunny's social life would improve a little bit, and for him to adapt to the city as sort of a fresh start, I think there's a bit of an issue with that. I'm not entirely sure about the stuff with his mom. I mean, a lot of people, myself included, got the impression that during the game, Sunny's mom was not the best mother figure to him. Mainly because of the scene where she stays in the distant town she's in to get a, quote, good bargain. Also the fact that she forgot to tell the electric company they needed an extra day in the house. What kind of mother decides to stay in a town for an extra 1 to 2 days and forego of seeing their 16-year-old clearly traumatized and unhealthy son just for a bargain on furniture, in addition to forgetting to tell the electric company that they needed another day in the house, leading to said 16-year-old son being home alone with no power, as well as the fact she didn't get him to therapy or really attempt to help him in any way that's shown in-game? All that paints the picture of is an extremely neglectful mother. So, considering all that, I don't think it's reasonable to assume that his home life has proved a ton, and therefore also drags down his social life in the city when he's not with his true friends in faraway town. I have no idea how I'd write Sunny's home life or how often he'd come to visit if I was the mod developer though, so I'm not sure how to feel about all of that. This might be relevant later, so I'll bring it up if it is. Oh yeah, and the scene talking to Angel is funny. Alright, here is another and very important piece of the game. Aubreys House. Obviously, in the original game, Aubreys House was a total mess because of her mom and the state she was in. I think it's a very logical step in progression for her to make an effort to clean up her house and live better, once again showing the moving on from grief narrative. It shows good character development. These lines of dialogue is also referencing the events of the game. Very clever. The expiration date reference is also awesome. I had a little chuckle over that one. The dialogue with Charlene is pretty funny. The scene of buying the body bandages for Aubrey is also a cute touch. Alright, now we get to one of the last important scenes of the mod, at the hangout spot. I think it's a great idea to bring up Sunny's nightmares and hallucinations while also bringing up her own. It's a great way to show that they still have to live with the past, but they can do everything in their power to make their future better. The narrative of forgiveness also returns, and the moving on from grief narrative is also present yet again. This scene also reinforces the innate fear they have of losing each other again, which also reinforces their pre-existing bonds, which you know are ironclad after literally everything they've been through. The next important scene happens pretty soon after, actually, in the graveyard. The scene of Aubrey talking to the preacher is also very nice. The dialogue when interacting with the grand piano is also a great touch, and it makes sense for Omori to be so hesitant to approach the piano, as the name of his alter ego was inspired by the grand piano in the first place, and you know, we all know how that turned out. The whole conversation at Mari's grave is also really great as well. It captures their wistfulness regarding Mari and wishing things could have changed, but also reinforces forgiveness and moving on from grief again. Aubrey saying how her life has gotten better after the makeup is also some logical progression as well. These lines of dialogue are also amazing. More continuation of the moving on from grief narrative. It's also great to see Mari in some form, in my opinion. I feel like it'd be incomplete without seeing something from Mari. I'm not so sure about the "well, it's not like he can hear me anymore" line of dialogue though. I don't know how to feel about that. Now, you've got this scene. The reference to them being kids is also fitting. I definitely think there might have been something between them as kids, so it's nice establishing that. Anyway, the last important scene to talk about is the scene where you interact with Sunny's house. I think it ties everything together pretty amazingly. Obviously, experiences like these stay with you forever, but these kinds of experiences come together to form who you are. You can't forget the past, but you can certainly learn to live with it and make peace with it. The line where Aubrey says, "Sure, it still hurts, but now there's so much more stuff that doesn't hurt," is also a great way to piece all the events of the game and the mod together. It reinforces forgiveness, moving on from grief, and also reinforces how you're never truly alone, and with the right people, you can pull through in any situation. A great insight to, as corny as it sounds, the power of friendship. Anyway, that's about it for Chapter 1. Oh, and one more thing. So, that's the end of Chapter 1. Unfortunately, I took too long to make this video, and Chapter 2 released, so meaning I have to do more work. It doesn't have as much overtly important things to talk about, as Chapter 1 was mainly about setting up their perspective on their past trauma, how they pulled through, and where they all stand today. I will talk about it a bit though, so here we go again. Alrighty. The first important scene for Chapter 2 comes in the hangout spot. I think this scene is awesome. The way this scene switches between different possible futures paints an extremely interesting picture. How would they have gone on if things were actually different? Once again, this reaffirms the narrative of not being able to change your past, but also doing whatever you can in your power to make a better future for yourself. And honestly, I think everyone would pull through even if things were different, because that's what true friendship really is. This specific scene right here is also a very awesome reference to Omori's early development. If you don't get it, you were originally intended to be able to choose Sunny's gender, to which Aubrey's gender would change as well. I mentioned that in this video, which is a cool Easter egg. Anyways, moving on. The characterization of Basil being a little nervous about his flower stand is also a nice reminder of Basil's character and personality as well. It's always nice to have moments showing characters' personalities in fanworks like these. Anyway, going into Aubreys house, the continuation of Aubrey cleaning up her house and the compliments from her friends about her improvement is also awesome to see. I don't know why, but I find Kel being bitten to be really funny, and the way he says, "He bit my finger really hard," is also an awesome character moment for Kel, and also very in character in general. The pestering of Basil about Kim is also in character for Aubrey, and Basil's reactions are also in character for him, which is always nice. So, here is the main point of contention for me for this chapter. The whole thing about trying to get Hero a girlfriend and his parents pestering him about being single feels kinda weird and a little out of character for everyone involved. Everyone knows how much Hero and Mari were in love. Heck, he fell into a 1-year depression when she died. Considering that, I think it's odd for his parents to pester him about being single, considering all that he's been through. In addition to that, his friends trying to get Hero a girlfriend is honestly something I can never ever see them doing. They know how much Mari meant to Hero, and trying to find Hero another love interest just feels, a little wrong. I understand the goal of this plot point, moving on from grief and making a better future for yourself, but for Hero, I honestly cannot see him ever finding another love interest. While Mari would obviously want them all to be happy, I can't help but feel that Hero would feel some sort of overwhelming guilt trying to pursue love again after losing Mari. That feels more in character for him than actively trying to find a girlfriend. In the original game, he's still having breakdowns about Mari, and this is only 1 year after the events of the game. Oh yeah, in this mod he's dating Daphne. Well, that's revealed later. I figured I might as well talk about it right now, so I could have everything relating to this plot point in one place. I'm overall not too sure how to feel about it. Skipping a little bit into the mod gameplay, the scene talking to Chris outside her house is also hilarious. Chris calling Kel, quote, "big boy," and asking him to run an errand for her feels so in character for him. This is the kind of stuff that makes me appreciate the world this mod has continued building. Another important scene is outside of Basil's house. I think the whole thing of Basil warming up to Polly more after the events of the game is also a very nice line of progression. Naturally, Basil was a nervous wreck for years, so he would certainly be extremely closed off towards anyone, really. While the source of its insecurity heavily lifted off of him and the new stronger trust in his friends, I think it's natural for Basil to accept Polly as a part of his life and begin warming up to her more. It's another great scene. The scene where they review Kel's plan again is also nice. They do bring up the possibility of him not being able to get over Mari. I think that's honestly something that they should have discussed more in this scene, as it should be a very real possibility in the back of their minds. I think Hero's speech about enjoying your youth that Aubrey says is also a very nice touch to his characters, and to all of their characters as well. Their youths were essentially immediately cut short, but Hero is the only one that doesn't still have some childhood to go before being a real adult. So that coming from him makes more sense. One moseying around Kel's house scene later. Here's the scene where we see Hiro going on a date with Daphne. I already explained what I think about that, so I won't touch on it. Oh yeah, let me just get this real quick. The next kinda important scene is a scene inside Kel's house with Hiro. The talk is nice, but I feel like him mentioning Mari would make him have some kind of facial expression change, or some kind of stutter, or something else, considering he just got done having a date with someone. Once again, there's the idea of Mari wanting everyone to be happy. I do understand that Hiro moving on also fits the narrative of this mod, but I do not think it's in his character to move on. That's just my opinion though, and it's definitely debatable. Continuing on, Hiro doing that weird grayscale thing is also a funny moment. They talk a little more about Mari again, which just kind of goes back to the stuff I've already said. Anyway, the rest of this conversation is great. And so the day is. This scene is very cute, and the thing about making their lives their own is also fitting with the story. However, wanting their lives to be each other's lives also makes sense. They've been through so much and developed such a profound connection with each other, it makes sense why they wouldn't want to abandon this new happiness they felt for anything. It goes without saying that I love Omori, its characters, and its story. I've done a ton of research about the game and watched like a bajillion video essays on it. As a natural progression of that, I've begun to develop a special affinity for these characters in a way that I've never really done before. These characters have gone through so much and overcame so much. But watching this scene made me feel something strange. These characters deserve to be happy after all they've gone through, but since I've developed such a special attachment to these characters, seeing them finally be happy kinda makes me happy as well. And you know what? I think that's beautiful. Wow, that was a kinda heartfelt ending. This mod gets so much right, and it almost makes you wish it was canon. While I'd already planned to make this the first mod I review, seeing Chapter 2 and its ending come out kinda gave me the push I needed to stop slacking and actually get to work on the dang thing. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next mod review I do. Maybe.